Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is John Sowash. Thanks for tuning in to my Connected Ink session. I've enjoyed tuning in to some of the other sessions throughout the day. I've seen some amazing digital art and some fun discussions with digital artists, and also some really interesting automotive designs. I tuned into a session earlier and was very impressed by some of the things that I saw. I'm coming to you live from Michigan, the automotive capital of the world. So those automotive sessions are very relevant to me here, not far from the headquarters of Ford, GM, and Chrysler. We're going to shift gears a little bit in this session. We're going to be talking about using digital ink in the classroom. I am a classroom teacher. I taught high school science, primarily biology, anatomy, taught yearbook, health, PE, even did a couple years as an English teacher. And I was a teacher in what I would call the transition from kind of analog paper and pencil instruction and slowly transitioning into digital instruction. Now, that transition has accelerated tremendously over the last year or so, mainly because of the COVID pandemic and many teachers and students being forced into remote learning. Now, when I was in the classroom, technology was something that you did every once in a while. My first couple years in the classroom, my school had a computer lab, and once a semester or so, you would take your students to the computer lab and do technology. Well, fast forward to 2021, and many teachers are teaching entirely virtually and online. Now, there are some things that traditionally have been done with ink, whether it's writing on a whiteboard or a chalkboard, writing things on a piece of paper, or for my math teachers out there, getting out those vis-a-vis markers and writing on the Elmo projector in the front of the room. Some things are a little bit easier to do with ink. And today I'm going to be sharing how teachers and students can make the transition from paper and pencil to using digital ink. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not against the use of paper in the classroom or traditional pens and pencils. They've worked well for thousands of years and will continue to be an important part of what we do. However, there are some tremendous advantages to doing things digitally. Collaboration is easier. Certain editing things are easier. It's a lot easier to erase and start over and then make adjustments with digital ink compared with, erasing things with the pencil, for example. So we need to find a happy medium and allow teachers to do some of the things that they have been doing with the red pen, for correcting student papers and providing feedback, writing on the chalkboard, kind of the free expression that those mediums offer. So that's my goal today, is to introduce you to digital ink, some of the tools that I use, and some of the ways that I do this in my classroom. I'd love to give you some resources to use throughout. You're certainly welcome to connect with me through social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, here on YouTube. I share a lot of content specifically for teachers, and if that's something you're into, I'd welcome you to do so. Today, we're going to be talking about 4 different applications for digital ink, because some things are just easier to do with a pen. Here are the 4 things that we're going to be looking at. And I'm going to be doing a lot of screen shares and demos throughout our session today. Now, you're an OG teacher if you recognize this picture here. It's been a long time since I got this awesome tool out. That is a bottle of correction fluid. You may recall years ago having to use whiteout to make changes to something. As a science teacher, I would use whiteout a lot. So when I was preparing my tests and quizzes, I would make a copy of one of the diagrams from our textbook that we had been studying, and I wanted my students to label them. And so I would carefully get out that bottle of correction fluid and whiteout and carefully white out all the different labels and then allow my students to fill that in with their own writing. How do you do that digitally? If you have an image that you need to crop, cut, or just mark up for your students to use, whether it's on an assessment or a presentation or student activity. How do you do that? So we're going to talk about preparing your lesson material using digital ink. I've got some examples, and I'll be sharing some of my favorite tools that I use along the way. Secondly, we're going to talk about teaching with digital ink. Like many of you, I was tremendously impacted by the school shutdown as part of the response to COVID-19. I went from, teaching and working with students live to being holed up in this office right here, teaching entirely virtually. Things that you took for granted, like the ability to just step up in front of the chalkboard or the whiteboard and draw something out, do a math problem, diagram a sentence, draw a concept map. Those simple things became a lot more complex when you were in your home. I saw some incredible adaptations by teachers. For example, there was many teachers who began teaching from their bathrooms because they figured out that they could use their shower as a whiteboard. So they were actually using their plastic shower backdrop and drawing with expo markers on it. Now if that works for you, that's great, but there are some great tools that I like to introduce you to that will allow you to teach a digital lesson as if you were in front of the whiteboard. You can see this picture right here. I was a biology teacher, and one of the lessons I taught every year was genetics, Punnett squares. That's a really hard thing to, do with a keyboard. You really have to be able to draw and sketch and doodle in order to teach Punnett squares and genetic crosses effectively. So we'll talk about some teaching tools, not just Zoom and Google Meet, but some of the other tools that you may not be familiar with. Number 3, I want to show you how you can use digital ink to allow your students to collaborate with one another. Now, this is actually one of the areas where digital ink can actually improve classroom instruction. It's really difficult to gather 4 or 5 students around a single piece of paper. And if you've tried that, it's problematic. It's hard for more than one person to write at a single time. But some of the digital tools that are available allow students to brainstorm, add ideas, annotate, sketch, draw together for group projects, whole class activities as well. So I'm going to share my favorite tool for making this happen and some example lessons that I've used that work well. And I've got some templates that you can take back to your classroom also. Finally, we're going to talk at the end of the session about assessment. I talk with a lot of teachers. I spoke with one just recently, and they're very comfortable using tools like Google Docs, Google Classroom, Chromebooks, a lot of the popular tools in classrooms today, but they still prefer to print out student work so that they can grade and annotate with an old school red pen. Now, if that works, I have certainly no issues with that. The goal is to provide students with actionable, useful feedback. How you do that is less important. But it is possible to provide handwritten feedback using digital ink. You have to have a couple of important tools, which I'll talk about. And there's a little secret trick related to Google Classroom that not everybody knows about that makes your life a lot easier. One of the benefits of providing digital feedback is that you can speed up the time of returning those assignments to students. I remember when I was teaching, they would turn in their papers on a Friday. And unless I wanted to grade all weekend, it would probably be Tuesday or Wednesday before I was able to return them to the student. That's a lot of time that's passed. With digital ink, I can grade things as they're being turned in. I can grade things during class if I want. I can even grade things as students are working on them and provide feedback very quickly. So assessment is an area where I think digital ink can provide some help and support. So those are our 4 areas that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at, again, preparing your lessons, teaching your lessons, allowing students to collaborate with one another, and then we'll wrap things up with some assessment and grading tips and tricks. Now, I'm going to be sharing 4 different tools with you. I think in my session description it says 3, but I just couldn't help myself. There's so many great tools out there. I had to even simplify that. These are what I use on a daily basis. I use these 4 tools regularly. And if you ask me, what I would recommend, this is them. There's lots of other ones. Not every tool will work for every teacher, but these are 4 tools that I think are definitely worth taking a look at. Couple of things before we jump into some live demos and look at these 4 tools in turn. Number 1, I only share tools that are free or have a free version. Okay. I recognize that, teachers are stretched as it is. The last thing I want to do is show you an amazing tool that you have to, fork out a lot of money to use. Every single one of the tools that you see on the screen right now is available for free. Now, one of them does have a freemium or a paid option. And if you like it enough, you might want to consider purchasing it. It's very affordable, but you can absolutely use it for free without upgrading to the premium account. I certainly would encourage all educators, if there's a tool that you use on a regular basis that makes your life easier, that helps your students show their work more effectively, support it, purchase it. Get your school to buy a subscription, a license, ask your, parent-teacher group to fund it. Support the tools that you use and make your life easier. I think all these tools, they all offer very different niche, have very different purposes. So I definitely think that a teacher could use all 4, not necessarily on a daily basis, but they're all very good and very useful. I'm a Chromebook person. I'm presenting from a Chromebook right now. That's what you see here. All of these tools can be used with pretty much any device, whether it's a Mac, a PC, a Chromebook, iPads, phones will work as well, although the screen will be, tiny. It'd be difficult to do some things on the smaller screen. So these are platform agnostic products available for all platforms. I'll be talking about a couple of different tools. I am going to be using the One by Wacom drawing tablet here. I'll talk about some different touchscreen options and ways that you can do the digital ink as we go through. All right, well, let's dive in and talk about our first tool. This is Chrome Canvas. Now, Chrome Canvas is an incredibly simple tool. Was developed by Google. It's not an app. It's just a website. You can see the link down there at the bottom. We'll open it up in a second here. And this is one of the tools that I use to prepare my lessons. So let me open up an example here. I have a quiz prepared. This is a quiz my students are going to be taking. We've been studying the parts of the eye. I'm a biology anatomy teacher. So we're studying the eye. We've been learning about all the different elements. And I'm going to need my students to label all the different elements of the eye. But in order to do that, I need an image where they're labeled ABC. It's very difficult to find a perfect image. You can search the web. Sometimes you get lucky, but most of the time I'm going to have to find something and then modify it. And that is why I use Chrome Canvas. So I'm going to open it up, canvas.apps.chrome. And this is just a drawing annotation tool. So here's the image that I loaded earlier. And I just, I find these. Sometimes they come with my textbook company. This one happens to come from Wikipedia. So it's an open source Creative Commons license. So here's my image. And my students need to identify, lens, pupil, iris. Those are some of the things they need to identify. So the first thing I'm going to need to do, like my old school whiteout that I talked about in the opening, is I need to erase these existing labels. And so I'm just using the pen tool here. This is not a complicated thing at all. I'll increase. I like to use the marker tool. I think it's a little easier. This is an incredibly simple tool. It's a little bit like Microsoft Paint, if you remember that. So I'm literally just whiting out the existing labels. And then, it depends on what your goals are. You certainly could have students fill in the labels. I'm going to go ahead and select a nice bright color. We'll use yellow. I'm going to adjust my brush size. And then I'm just going to be labeling these. This is going to be A. This is going to be B. And then this is going to be C, okay? And you can make this as complex as you want. You can use letters, numbers, however you want to set it up. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and download this image with my annotations. This is my quiz, and I'm going to add that image into my quiz. So this happens to be Google Forms. You can use this with a lot of different quiz applications. Let me go ahead and add an image. We're going to upload that image we just saved. There we go. And that will sit in my quiz, and then I'll be able to write my test questions, accordingly. So I'll say, parts of the eye. And then down below, we've got questions, what is the structure indicated by? This will have to be changed to, A in the image above. And so that's our lens. We go ahead and select that, and we're good to go. You can do this for all kinds of things, whether it's math. It's very good for social studies, for maps, timelines, certainly science. Diagrams like this is very good. Let me go ahead and refresh our quiz here. You can see what this will look like. So now our image is in there, so students will see that, and then they'll be able to answer the questions down below. Adding images and annotated graphics to your assessments is a way to make them more engaging than just straight up multiple choice questions. It takes a lot more critical thinking and understanding of key concepts to answer those image-based questions. Let's go back to Chrome Canvas for a minute. I doctored that one up for you, but I use Chrome Canvas in so many different ways. This was a fun activity that I was working on recently. I just went to Unsplash, which is a place where you can get free, very high resolution, very high quality images. And I started to look for any image that included a triangle, because my students were practicing, identifying the hypotenuse. And it's kind of boring. Math worksheets are kind of boring. So I found all these cool architectural images, and I just added random lengths, and then their job is to figure out the hypotenuse for that particular length. So I got a couple of those. I do this a ton for screenshots. If you're doing any type of tutorials, if you're a technology teacher, if you're teaching students how to use Google Classroom or Google Docs, sometimes it's so much easier to just be able to circle that button and say, look for this. A picture is worth 1,000 words, as they say. And I'll put these in my blog posts, my social media graphics, my directions and instructions. And it helps students understand what they need to do. I'll do a lot of teacher tutorials as well. And a lot of those are drawn up in here inside of Chrome Canvas. Students can certainly use Chrome Canvas as well. I mean, you can take any of these lessons and have them find a picture of a triangle in architecture and measure and evaluate those sides. So that's my first tool. This is Chrome Canvas, and this replaces, thankfully, the bottle of correction fluid that I used to use in my classroom. It's been a few years since I had to get that out. Let's move on to tool number 2. You have prepared your lesson. Now we're going to teach a lesson. Many of you, if you've been teaching remotely, have probably used Zoom, Google Meet, and those products, they're good for virtual meetings. They weren't necessarily designed for the classroom. Now, they've made a lot of improvements and adjustments for them, but it's really a way that you can connect with another person through video and audio. This tool here, Whiteboard.fi, provides you with a digital whiteboard for you and all of your students. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can use Whiteboard.fi. If you are pre-recording your lessons, you can use it to record that, do a problem, and then students can watch it. But even more cool is the opportunity for your students to join you in that digital whiteboard to do practice problems and sling some digital ink. Let's go ahead and check out whiteboard.fi. It's so easy. The user interface for whiteboard.fi is amazing. Now, there are a lot of whiteboarding tools out there. I've reviewed probably 4 or 5 of them. Everyone has their kind of pro and con. I recommend whiteboard.fi because of its simplicity. It doesn't necessarily have every bell and whistle that you can imagine, but it's got a lot of great basic features, and it's super easy to use. One of the first things you see, you come to this screen. If you're ready to go, all you have to do is click this button, start a class, okay? You don't have to sign in. You don't have to sign up. There's no login. You just get ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and right now I'm in the teacher whiteboard. And I mean, at its core, this is just a basic literal whiteboard. You know, I can go in here and sketch. You can add images. You can do all kinds of things. I'm going to go ahead and open a new tab and also log in as a student so you can see what that looks like. So again, whiteboard.fi. Now for students, they're going to click on join a class, and they need to be given the room code. And I'm going to go ahead and you would write that on your whiteboard or just verbally tell them join class. And so now the student is connected to my whiteboard. They get their own. So this is the student whiteboard. Okay. And I, as the teacher, am able to see all of the students. So I can take a look and say, oh, that's what this person is doing. That's what this person is doing, while I have my whiteboard up as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a little sample quick lesson just to kind of show the possibilities here. You've got, as you can see, a ton of different icons and things you can do. Now I will warn you, like I mentioned at the top, whiteboard.fi is a freemium product. Most of the features are free, but there's a couple that you do need to pay for. I'm just going to focus on and stick to the free features, which are great. I'm going to go ahead and click on add an image. And earlier this morning, I happened to see my daughter. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she was doing her pre-algebra homework. So I snapped a quick picture of it, and I can now jot or insert that into my whiteboard, and we can actually do a practice problem right here through whiteboard.fi. Now, if you're teaching virtually, this is amazing. I mean, if you're in the classroom, then just hand everybody the worksheet and you can all do it together. But if you're teaching virtually, how are you going to be able to see what every kid is doing? You can't exactly walk around the room unless you're using a tool like whiteboard.fi. So we're talking about monomials and raising the power, multiplying and adding exponents. I'm going to make sure I'm using my pen tool. This is a pretty simple concept. Whenever you're multiplying, you're simply going to multiply the 2 and the 5 together. So that is 8 to the power of 10. This one here is a little trickier because anytime you raise the power of a positive number, it actually cancels out that negative. So this one would actually end up being 15 to the power of 18. So we can actually do this together. Now I did the first two. This is pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and click this button right up here. This is the push button. And I'm going to push the current page to my students. So I did the first two. Let me switch over to my student. So the student gets this, and they can go ahead and do the second one. So this is 4. Negative 2 times 2, which is going to be negative 4 to the negative 4th power. So we'll go back. Now as the teacher, I'm able to actually go down here and see my student, and I can say nice job. I can say thumbs up. I can leave feedback. on that assignment. So this allows me to provide that instant feedback that you typically can get in the classroom, even if you're in a virtual session. Now, depending on what kind of devices you have and what's going on in your school, you can also get some tremendous value out of a tool like Whiteboard.fi in the classroom if you're in person. Some things are just easier to do on paper, and other things are great digitally. I mean, I used to do a lesson and do things like this on the overhead projector, but there was a disconnect between me and the students. Like, I would do it out there and they would do it, on their paper, but I couldn't really show it. Well, this allows me to say, hey, look, Joe did a great job. This is or has a question, and I can pull that up in front of the class and we can talk about it. So it makes learning a lot more engaging and interactive when you have this collaborative potential and possibility. I hope you'll consider checking out whiteboard.fi. Wonderful tool for teaching a lesson with digital ink. Now, at the end of our session here today, I am going to make available a summary of everything that I'm sharing here. I have student examples, tutorials, videos, lesson templates that you're welcome to use. So if any of this resonates with you, stick around at the end. I'll throw up a URL and you can download a copy of all my session slides. All right, let's move on to category number 3. So we have prepared a lesson, we have taught a lesson. Now we need to see if students actually remember anything that we have shared with them. I learned very quickly as a teacher that just because you say it doesn't mean they remember it or have internalized it. And so at some point, you want to turn the digital pen, the digital ink over to them and give them an opportunity to practice their skills. You can do that a little bit with Whiteboard.fi, but this next tool is my favorite way to encourage students to collaborate with digital ink. This is Jamboard. Now, Jamboard is a member of the Google Drive family. If your school uses Google Docs, Slides, Sheets, and Forms, and Jamboard is available for you as well. And it's basically a whiteboard. It shares some similarities with Whiteboard.fi in that, it is a whiteboard and you can draw on it, but it's designed for collaboration. Rather than everybody working on their own separate whiteboard, we're going to be working together on a whiteboard, and we can brainstorm, we can jot down ideas, we can sketch and doodle, and it has built in all of the collaborative creative power of Google Drive. Let's take a look. Now, I developed these five different lessons for Jamboard. I'm just going to share one with you here today. This is Annotation Station. That's what I call it. And it's a very simple concept. You can apply this to virtually any subject area or grade level. You're going to provide students with some type of an image. The more detailed and complex, the better. And then you're going to just simply ask students to annotate that image. So this might be a history lesson. We have a piece of classic art featuring the Roman Empire. And I will go ahead and add a little instructions here, where this is Greek contributions. How many contributions of Greek society can you identify from the image below? And the idea is that students will utilize the pen tool. Again, has some similarities to both Chrome Canvas and Whiteboard.fi. So we might look at this, and you can kind of definitely see right in the middle here, you've got this Greek soldier. So you might say military advancements. Okay, so definitely military improvements. Got this giant sculpture over here. The Greeks were certainly well known for their art and sculpture. So we'll jot that down. If your students have touchscreen devices, whether it's touchscreen Chromebooks, iPads, Surface tablets, phones, whatever that touchscreen is, then the pen tool is a great way to freeform, circle and draw. Not every school has access to touchscreen devices. Touchscreen Chromebooks are becoming more common and popular. I always encourage schools to purchase touchscreen Chromebooks if possible. But if you don't have touchscreen, you can still use Jamboard. But you'll probably want to utilize or take advantage of this tool right here, the sticky note. So this allows students to add a sticky note, and I might say finance. So financial improvements or contributions, over here. And I'm just going to use my actual trackpad just to demo this. It's possible, like you can draw a line with your mouse, your trackpad. It's going to be hard to write, but I can just kind of draw a line over here to finance. So depending on the type of device you have, your instructions, how you want to set this up, this is a great way to use Jamboard. Jamboard is 100% free. If you're using Google Classroom, it integrates with Google Classroom. You can make a copy of assignments, you can grade it, and do all the cool Google Classroom stuff. If you're not using Google Classroom, you can use Jamboard. Jamboard is just a free part of Google Drive. You can use your personal account if you want to. Just make sure that students have access to the file. Just like any other Google document presentation, you just hit that share button and give access to the people you want to be able to edit this. You can add as many frames as you want. So I already mocked this. So here's what I might expect to see from my students. Do this as individual assignments, whole class assignments, or group. Group project is probably best. Jamboard gets a little bit crazy if you have too many students editing at the same time. Typically, I would say that 3 to 5 is ideal. If you have more than that, you'll probably have to have multiple frames so that there's space for everyone to make some changes. This is just one of several Jamboard activities that I've designed. This one is called Annotation Station. I've got one called Line Attack. That's really fun. There's one called Sticky Graph, which is also very good for non-touchscreen devices. I'm going to provide you guys with a link to all 5 of those sample Jamboard activities. And if you want any of those, you can make copies and use them in your classroom. So that's tool number 3. If you want to teach a lesson and have your students, demonstrate or prove that they actually understand the key concept that you've been teaching them, Jamboard is a great way to do that. Now, there's some funny things about Jamboard that I've observed just in student behavior. Jamboard is not very structured. It's kind of a brainstorm, creative application, and so you'll discover that your very organized Type A students will struggle with Jamboard, but your more creative, free-thinking students will really thrive inside of Jamboard. One of the things that I always try to do as a teacher is use different tools that naturally align themselves with different personality types. Now, I'm not always going to use Jamboard. Those students who are more analytical and structured thinkers, a Google document, a spreadsheet might be something they're more comfortable with, but I don't want to do that all the time. So just going back and forth between several different tools, similar to working out different muscles in your body, will help students improve in many different ways, and especially in areas that they may be naturally weak in. So we have prepared a lesson, we've taught a lesson, we've helped students practice what they're learning. The final thing that we typically need to do as a teacher is assess student learning, provide them with feedback and constructive ideas for improving. Now, this is an area that teachers have struggled with. Creating digital content, not that hard. Preparing a lesson, you can do that. COVID has taught a lot of teachers how to teach virtually, but the grading part has still been a struggle. it's still been a challenge to grade things using digital ink. There's lots of options. You've got comments and private feedback. But sometimes, again, that whole red pen on a sheet of paper has worked well for many, many years, and a lot of teachers prefer that. I want to just illustrate and document that there are different ways that you can provide handwritten feedback to students. You don't have to use it. If you still prefer to do it on paper, that's certainly fine, but give it a thought. Give it a try. I'm a big user of Google Classroom. I support schools who are using Chromebooks, Google Classroom, and Google Drive. So I'm going to document or demonstrate how you can do this through Google Classroom. Now, the trick to doing this is that you actually need to use the Google Classroom mobile app. There is a secret feature of the Google Classroom Android app. That Android app will work on the mobile app, certainly can be used on iPads, phones, Android or iOS. But there's a little known thing that a Chromebook can access Android apps. So right now, what you see on the screen is the Google Classroom Android app running on my Chromebook. And I can go full screen. So I have a nice big screen. I really don't like doing this on my phone. It's just too small of a screen for me. It looks a little different, but if you use Classroom, you'll recognize this. I'm going to go ahead and open up my English class here. Go to my classwork page. Now, my students are working on a research paper, and I have 2 of them that have been turned in. Let me open up Susan's. Oops, she hasn't turned hers in yet. Let's go to, there we go, there's Polly. So here's Polly's paper. Now, this is a Google Doc, but because I'm using the Android app, when I open it, it's going to give me a little preview. So this is very different than what you would expect on the web version of Google Classroom. This, down here in the corner, is the magic button. So you have a little squiggly line. This allows me to edit a previous or edit using annotation tools. There we get it. I'll do a new one. Now, this is actually built on a similar tool as Chrome Canvas. So here is Polly's paper. And down at the bottom, you can see I have an eraser, a pen, highlighter, marker, and even text. So I can go in here, and if I see something that needs to be corrected, muscular, there's a little spelling error here, I can circle that. Her first sentence is kind of a weak thesis. So I would like to see that improve. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that in green. So our first sentence here, and actually I will use the highlighter tool, so it's a little easier to see. And I'm going to go ahead and actually just type right in here and say, let's work on improving this thesis sentence. So this is kind of a combination of annotation and markup. I can put that wherever I need to. And the goal is to get this back to the student as quickly as possible. I'm going to, I'll mark this all up. Maybe I'll go down to page 2 here, take a quick look. Oh yeah, so we got to definitely fix this. It needs to be in MLA format. MLA. Some of you are having a panic attack thinking back to your college careers. MLA APA format. Format, please. Okay. When I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and save that. This actually generates a PDF with my changes and attaches it to the student's submission. So again, they have their original, which is unchanged, and then they have my annotated version down below. Now the next thing I would go is down here under the private comments. And I might just say, hey, Polly, return this to her so you can actually see it. I might say, hey, Polly, right now, do this. Hey, Polly, you have a few corrections that you need to make on your research paper, period. If you make those corrections, I'm happy to regrade it and increase your score, exclamation point. So I can send that back. She has an opportunity to correct it, improve it, which is the whole goal of grading things, is to give students an opportunity to improve and learn from their initial mistakes. Now, there are many other ways that you can do this. A lot of teachers, if you're not using Google Classroom, if you're using Canvas or Seesaw or Schoology, I would recommend looking at a tool called Kami, Kami, that also allows very similar PDF annotations, just like I'm doing here inside of Google Classroom. If you're interested in what you see me doing on the screen, the key, again, is to utilize the Google Classroom mobile app. If you have an iPad with an Apple Pencil, awesome, that will work wonderfully. If you have a touchscreen Chromebook like I do, as long as you install the Android app on your Chromebook, that will work very well also. So that allows you to assess student work, in this case, through Google Classroom. So we've looked at 4 different ways that you can use digital ink in the classroom. You can prepare a lesson with Chrome Canvas, teach a lesson with Whiteboard.fi, allow your students to collaborate together using Jamboard, and then grade and assess their work using the annotation feature of Google Classroom. As we begin wrapping up, I want to show you some of the tools that I've been using here. All the tools, all the software tools that you see, like I mentioned earlier, are free. You can access them through the web browser. Jamboard is available as an Android, iOS app if you have phones and tablets. Whiteboard.fi is just a website. Google Classroom available for all platforms, and so is Chrome Canvas. I'm currently presenting from a touchscreen Chromebook. This is the HP X360. One of the nice things about Chromebooks, especially newer Chromebooks, is that they all have USI support. Now, USI stands for Universal Stylus Initiative. Touchscreens have been a kind of a hot mess over the last few years because you had to find the perfect pen to match with the device that you have, and it wasn't easy to figure out. Universal Stylus Initiative is a lot like USB. Okay, if you remember back in the 90s, trying to plug things into your computer was horrible. You had to find the right adapter, and was it compatible with this device, that device? That's how pens have been. USI promises to allow you to have any digital stylus, and will work with any USI compatible device. All Chromebooks manufactured after, I think, 2019 come with USI support if it's a touchscreen. You can go on Amazon. There are dozens of USI styluses. You can buy them very inexpensively or very, very expensive if you want to spend a ton of money. If you have a touchscreen Chromebook, I would strongly recommend adding a digital pen to it. Even if your device didn't come with one, you can always add a digital pen. I got some resources that I'll share with you that'll allow you to find a pen that works for your device. If you're going to do any of the strategies that I shared here today, I mean, you can use your finger for a while, but grading 35, 50 papers with your finger is not a tremendous experience. You really are going to want some kind of a digital stylus. If you do not have a touchscreen device, if you're using a Mac or a Windows device, I really like the one by Wacom. This is a Wacom event, and I'm using Wacom devices. This is a very affordable device. It's, I think, $50 on Amazon, and you just plug it in, and you've got touchscreen. I'm not really interested in teaching a 60-minute lesson on my touchscreen. I want a flat surface like this. Now, I'm a lefty. Handwriting's not really my thing. I know all of you were very impressed with my handwriting skills, but this helps. It's just a lot easier than trying to write, vertically on the screen. There are more sophisticated drawing tablets. Wacom's got Bluetooth ones, so you can walk around the classroom. I just have this wired one, depending on what I'm doing. If it's a simple thing like Chrome Canvas, I'll just sketch on my screen. If it's a more complex thing like teaching a lesson, then I'll pull out the drawing tablet and use that to teach my lesson, especially for math and things that require a lot more sketching and doodling. If you're interested in any of the resources that I shared today, I'd be happy to provide you with a summary of them, links to all my classroom templates and whatnot. Head over to this website, chrm.tech/Wacom21. And just fill out that form and I will email you. It comes instantly, a summary of everything that we chatted about today, including all those lesson templates. Teaching is a calling, and I know that every teacher that I've ever met, chatted with, is dedicated to challenging their students and equipping them to be successful in the 21st century. Some things are easier to do with ink, paper, and pencil, but there are some challenges today that prevent, using paper and pencil, and sometimes digital ink can be a great alternative. Hopefully, I've given you some things to think about, some new tools to explore, and some new lesson strategies to check out for your classroom. I'd love to connect with you. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the places, all the socials. And if you download that guide, you'll get my contact information. If I can help you in any way, just hit reply to that email. Let me know what's on your mind, and I'll do my best to answer those questions as quickly as I can. Thanks for joining me for this session of Connected Ink, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great afternoon. Take care.